All right, everybody. Good news. I'm back in the Shadow Realm. I've seen the future. I know who's going to win the Super Bowl. I know who the MVP is. So if I offer you a player and say that they're going to set scoring records next year, it's because I saw the answer in the Shadow Realm. So you guys should just believe me and accept the trade as I sent it to you. But anyways, I'll try and keep it mostly under wraps so you guys can still have a fun season. Um, we're talking through a couple of things. It's kind of dead season right now, post draft before the OTAs start. So just kind of looking for some topics. So obviously, Jay happened earlier in the chat in the day that we'll refer to. But second thing is something we were just talking about is kind of what happens with the receiver market. Jalen Waddle just got paid in real life. You got a couple other guys looking for big contracts. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, C.D. Lamb. So some money's going to keep flying around here. So definitely a question of, hey, some of these guys, like, well, where do they go? What's their leverage? What's the, hey, if you don't pay me, these guys are going to, especially with so many thoughtfully great receivers coming out of this draft. So we're just going to keep going with that. Figured it was a good conversation to just have on air as well. So we're just going to keep rolling with it, and then we'll touch on Purdy and get into the other stuff. But thanks for listening, and yeah, it should be fun.
Yes, I'm excited.
And of course, Rory's kids will jump in every now and then too. So it's Vikings, it's Panthers, it's Eagles, and it's Colts. So, anyways, I think we were talking T. Higgins, right?
Yeah. And potential landing spots for him if he ends up moving on from the Bengals.
I mean, the big threat is obviously is still Buffalo.
I was just looking at that.
They designed that team this year to be like, okay, Josh Allen doesn't need a number one receiver. We're going to get him the big tall guy to win the jump balls in Keon Coleman. We're going to get him. We've already got kind of that slot guy in Khalil Shakir. Got our gadget guy in Curtis Samuel. Big tight end who can, win actually two tight ends in Knox and Kincaid. And then, I don't know, like 17 running backs at this point. So, you know what? This is the year of like the YOLO. Josh can do it by himself, and it's very easy to see that. Okay, they go 10-6, losing the first round, and they say, "Whoops, we over rotated. Let's bring in a number one." It doesn't need to be Stephon Diggs level, but we need a number one to complement everything we're doing here.
You know what's crazy though? It currently shows they only have $400,000 in estimated cap space for next year. Obviously, that's before the cap goes up, but
yeah.
And looking at it, they have a lot of contracts they can't really get out of still.
Well, that was the thing going into this year too. They were in like cap hell for the better part of the offseason, right? They had to pass on again. Part of the deals they made were because they just couldn't pay these guys.
Yeah, they definitely had some aging and injured vets that hadn't been performing that were a little overpaid.
Yep. Well, I mean, you heard the GM called the Diggs contract the albatross because of how difficult it is for them to do anything with it. I will say though about Buffalo, I don't think this is necessarily the year he does it all himself. I really like Kincaid and Coleman. And then Shakir's quietly been a really effective number 2, number 3 option. I think those guys could surprise us this year.
Well, that was the stat that I forget which website does the in sample and out of sample comparisons, and it was Josh Allen's stats when Stephon Diggs was on the field versus when he wasn't, and based off of that, the sample was that he was substantially more efficient and more effective as a passer when he couldn't zoom in or force feed the ball to Diggs. When it was kind of just go to the hot hand and have the right kind of receivers on the field to feed, he was more effective that way. So I feel like this is the year they test that. But again, it's kind of like last year with Tony Pollard. Like last year it was, okay, Tony Pollard is one of the most efficient, effective running backs in the league when he touches the ball 220 times in a season. When he gets a full workload, he breaks down. So it's a question, or sometimes that happens and they go full Michael Turner on things. So it's one of those where it could hit or miss, but this I feel like is the test version of what the sample was, and it could succeed and the Bills kill it, or it could fail miserably and they're looking for, or not even miserably, and they're looking for a number one to help anchor things next year.
I could certainly see that. I mean, like you said, Josh Allen was much more efficient when Diggs was off the field. Those stats usually don't end up being 100% correct because you have a whole bunch of other factors that fall into it where, maybe it's more of like a rundown, so the defense isn't expecting a pass, Diggs is off the field, and then they kind of surprise them with a pass. So, to a degree, it's probably not 100% accurate, but I could see an improvement of not focusing on Diggs and feeling like you have to satisfy your number one guy.
You mean you don't like the A.J. Brown divas?
Not particularly. No. I like
The
A.J. Brown.
Devontae Smith has 6 catches for 158 yards and a touchdown. I have 2 catches for 28 yards. We're winning by 20, but I'm throwing my helmet on the sideline. Get me the ball.
Was that Odell Beckham? I'm sorry. Who?
No, AJ didn't throw his helmet, but I've definitely seen him screaming at coaches during some games when they ain't losing. He just ain't catching the ball.
Yep. And I think that's why a lot of those guys tend to flame out, like Odell kind of did, is anytime there's any sort of dip in production, people's patience runs out, and then it's just like, get this guy out of here. So,
yeah.
And that's what's happened with Diggs a little bit. I feel like Diggs has not been as good of a receiver this last year, maybe even the last 2 years, than he was that first year or two he was in Buffalo.
Both of these last 2 seasons, once you get to around like week 10, he's really struggled in the back half of seasons to really produce.
Yeah.
So maybe, there could be a multitude of reasons for that, but it's definitely there.
It could be something as simple as without Brian Daboll, their offense has started to stagnate over the second half when teams get a lot of film on them.
Well, now they got Joe Brady, boys. They got the OC for LSU during the Joe Burrow skirt 65 touchdowns.
We'll see. I'm not a huge college football fan, but isn't the division LSU in kind of a lesser?
LSU's in the SEC, boy.
That's what I said. I don't know anything about college.
That's the big dick swinging conference. No, LSU's good.
It's like going 13-3 in the NFC South in real life, and there's going 13-3, or I guess 14-3 now. That the 17 games in the AFC North. I guess both our league and real football. Like I feel like going 14-3 in the AFC North is like, okay, you survived Murderers Row and crushed everybody. Like you are clearly an elite team. Where like right now, any team that's above average could get 6 wins out of the NFC South.
Oh, yeah. And anytime they add like a single average to mediocre piece, it's suddenly like, oh, this team is the best team in that division now.
Like, again, nothing against him in real life, but like, okay, they add Baker Mayfield and Tampa goes, back-to-back in the division? Like, okay, so average quarterback play. Like, I would say right now, if you were to say what's the Mendoza line for or warp line for the quarterback position, it's, are you better than Baker Mayfield?
Yeah.
Yeah, the NFC South definitely has some problems. They don't have very many elite players or premier players that are young, essentially anywhere, that are actually producing to the degree you would want to see elite premier young players.
I was going to say, how many qualifiers do you have to put on this? That are
I know there's a lot of people that'd be like, well, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan. It's like, they're all great young talents, but they're not producing, guys. Yeah. Until they're producing, it's meh.
It's pretty much just Chris Olave?
Yeah, but the reason for just Chris Olave is because there ain't anybody else to throw the ball to in New Orleans. Teams double and triple team Olave to the point where Rashid Shaheed's running down the field, and they're like, oh, they have another guy out here?
It's all right.
I didn't even see him walk out here.
Over. Was there ever a more obvious pairing than me taking Spencer Rattler?
No.
I feel like I almost telegraphed that to quick pay levels.
I figured you would end up with him if there were a couple of teams that I wouldn't have been surprised if they drafted him, and you were one of them.
So, all right, well that's T. So what about these elite guys? So if Waddle's getting this money, like, does this just kind of reset the market, or if you're Chase, Lamb, or Jefferson, and Waddle's getting what 3 for 84?
No, I mean he got top 5, but that's
Top five
because
money.
he's a wide receiver too. If you're the wide receiver 1 on your team, like a Jefferson or like a CD, you should expect to like change the market in every aspect, like guaranteed and average dollar.
So like, are we talking like 4 for 150 and 100 million guaranteed?
Well, that would do it.
Like 90 guaranteed, somewhere just north of 100. Like that makes sense.
Like 3 years, 120. It might be too much. 4
Probably.
years, 130.
Yeah, like 4 years, 120, 95 up front.
Yeah. I mean, does that feel a little low? What did Devontae Adams get when it was extended?
So Devontae's like 28. The highest paid, I believe, is AJ Brown.
So Adams got 5 for 140. AJ Brown's got 3 and 96. So Amon-Ra is next at 4 at 120. If I'm AJ, CD, or Chase, the conversation starts for me at 35 a year.
You really want to add $3 million to the top?
4 at 140. That makes sense.
Again, that's probably why a deal hasn't been done yet, but you know.
Yeah. I mean, didn't we get like this with running backs? What was it, 10 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, where they started getting insane contracts, the teams just unilaterally stopped paying them.
Yep.
That's what I was about to bring up. Have we finally seen that critical mass of young receivers where guys like T. Higgins just aren't going to get that huge contract they want?
Yeah, so the conversation in the chat going that direction today, I think it's an interesting thought. Because, I mean, for every Diggs Jefferson situation, you get a AJ Brown Burks situation. So it's, a great idea and also a terrible idea at the same time. And probably why, teams like the Niners put it out there, but, they don't pull the trigger on it. But again, you have to find the right guys for your system too, and those aren't always available in every draft.
Yeah.
I guess the other question is, are we at the point too with some of these contracts and some of these numbers getting so large that the thing that they should be prioritizing instead of going for 35 APY is just getting the largest percentage guaranteed as possible?
Going the Kirk Cousins route?
I've heard that it's been a while now that I've heard that conversation. I don't know if anybody will ever get to a point where they're like it's associated with a percentage. Like I think
Waddle just got 76 million of his deal, so you're talking like 95% guaranteed.
No, he's talking a percent of cap, like back.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
during the initial Russell Wilson extensions in Seattle, I think there's a rumor that he was trying to push for a percentage of the salary cap as his
just every year.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen because teams want to be able to do the Jalen Hurts contracts to where it's like, hey, we're actually going to be paying you the majority of your contract 2 years after your contract expires. because we want to stay as competitive as we possibly can right now.
Yeah.
And you can just bend us over a barrel later if you're still good. If not, we'll just we'll be in the same situation Denver is right now. So
Could be worse.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, if I'm the other part of it too, and the other aspects of it is like, does your team have like the flexibility to even pay you? And then, we're talking about the amount of teams that are open on the available market. Like, what's to make me want to pay, one of these guys an absorbent amount when I could get the potential comp pick for letting them go, and then just signing someone like T.
And getting 75-80% of their production. I think we're going to see that situation where it's like the top two guys, the game changers, the uncoverable guys that are a threat to put up 2,000 receiving yards. They get their huge contract, and everyone else is kind of left, getting the scraps. So like JJ, he gets his big contract. Maybe AJ Brown when that year comes around for his contract, and then it's like Jamar Chase. And that's pretty much it.
Well, my thing is Jefferson's the clear-cut easiest to pay.
Hey.
Like, Jefferson doesn't have a quarterback getting paid right now. But Jamar and CD both have a quarterback, and, Dallas, they also have a lot of other players, too, that they're about to have to pay with Parsons and everything else. To the degree it gets to where it's like some of these teams might not be able to afford to really have a very well-constructed roster without finding some different way to avoid some of these gigantic numbers that are kind of being thrown out.
Well, you get a hold of the Minnesota front office and try to get them to realize that, because the longer they wait, the more expensive JJ's getting.
Hey, I did have dinner with members of the Wolf family in the last year, so we'll see what I can do.
So if it isn't the wide receiver position that ends up with yes, Liam, you're right. If it isn't the wide receiver position that ends up with that cut cost, what position ends up being sacrificed? Is it those superstar D tackles? Is it an edge rusher that you might have normally given $30 million? Maybe now you settle for a lesser guy.
No, I think it'll just be like with the wide receivers. I think we'll just see better players taking those like 1 year betting on themselves type of deals, just because there's not much of a market outside, the top 12 or so.
Okay, so guys like DJ Moore maybe
is there might be a year where he takes a good price, like a 17 or something, but like a 1 year deal, just because nobody's willing to give him that long term, because like to agree to pay that much long term to a wide receiver just probably isn't going to be in the works for most teams.
Well, we're also getting into this weird spot to where it feels like every position is starting to get paid, essentially outside of running back. Like, we have seen now defensive tackles are getting paid a lot more. Guards are getting paid a lot more. We're getting to a point to where it's going to be really hard to construct and keep players at all positions with the current cap, especially star players, to where teams are going to have to make, it seems like, either harder decisions or keep punting stuff down the road until it comes back and bites them at some point.
Yeah. Well, it feels like linebackers don't really get huge contracts like that still.
Some do. Like Tremaine Edmonds got way overpaid to go to Chicago.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
A lot of them seem to backfire. Like, that's they're basically the running back position on defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Where some of them are products of the system, some of them just they didn't have that big year and they never really figured it out elsewhere.
Yep. Shaq Leonard, right after he gets paid, is a shell of himself. And,
yeah.
Like, I'm sure there's a handful of those type of contracts that we could point to in recent years.
Yeah, and some of them have just been avoided too. Like, look at Devin White. Like, Devin White was like, "Yeah, I want to reset the linebacker market," and Tampa's like, "No, we're not going to do that."
Yep. And I don't think they're going to regret that either. I don't think Devin White's a bad player, but I don't think he's worth, I don't know, what are linebackers getting paid, 18 a year?
Yeah. To me, it seems like the money is going the way of basically the draft. We've identified the positions where the players make the most impact: defensive back, interior lineman, quarterback, wide receiver for the time being, and like those seem to be the places where a good amount of the money gets spent. Sure, there's always the all pro guards that definitely deserve to get paid, a large amount. But it just seems like when teams go out and are willing to spend money, as of late, it just seems to be on those positions that are considered the most impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the only safety who's really got paid in recent memory is essentially Jesse Bates, right? Getting his 16 a year.
Pretty much. I
Like
think
before that, I think
starting
it's
to
the Jamal
realize-
Adams grade and pay.
I think teams have started to realize that you can get away with having not quite role players, but definitely lesser talents at a couple of those positions. And as long as you have, a superstar edge and someone to collapse the pocket in the interior, and then a corner that can shut down the JJs, the Chases, then you can get away with having a super mid-tier or safety in the back end. Like Blankenship, undrafted free agents, not anything like overly freak athleticism, but he's pretty good at coverage and he's pretty good at run support and he does all that decently and he just works in that system because they've got a great, front seven.
So, I mean, I like to make analogies, as you guys know. Some of these skill positions, I'm not going to throw running backs in there, but this is going down the rabbit hole of NFL to NBA and copycat leagues here. It's running backs, linebacker, some of those less sexy positions. Those are your centers. Those are the guys that they're not really part of today's game unless they're something unique or specific roles or situations where they're going to stand out. Like, no, there's one Nikola Jokic in the league. There's a handful of other guys who are special at that position. Otherwise, it's highly replaceable. Receivers, corners, these are your guards. These are the guys that help you win a title. But in today's game, a guard isn't going to win you a title. They're going to be really important, really helpful, and be a star of your team potentially. But the point is, you're not going to get there unless you have either a complete standout that can carry you at one of these, unsexy positions, or you have that, star 3 and D wing that everybody needs. That's your quarterback. Those are your positions. So it's the, do these guards and do these centers still get paid in the NBA? Absolutely. I see teams value these positions higher than they should in the NFL. No question. Same in our league. But in my opinion, I think what the NFL is trying to go towards is give me the position that everyone's trying to copycat, and I have that guy. Like, that's who I'm paying. Now, there's still money going towards, okay, this is the next Debo, or this guy, he runs routes like Ayuk, or this is the this guy I'm going to develop Jordan Love like he's our Mahomes, or who are some of the other quarterbacks that we're getting compared to these guys? It's you're overpaying for a signature trait or the signature guy that everyone's trying to copycat, and that ebbs and flows in every year. Like tight end needs to be the range where everyone's trying to find their Kelsey, and I feel like we're almost fading away from that.
Yeah, the AR, the Anthony Richardson. His accuracy shit, but he's big, he's fast, he can run, and he's got a giant cannon.
Yep,
Trying to copy Josh Allen.
There's always that's why we've had all those quarterbacks taken in recent memory, like why there's been 4 and 5 quarterback first rounds, because there's one that fits all of the archetypes of a quarterback, and then everybody just puts all of them on a pedestal. Like, well, you want the athletic guy, and then you have the You have like the guy that throws beautiful passes in their camps and like shines in the scouting process. You have somebody that's like the veteran NFL style quarterback that is uninspiring or like the not sexy pick.
But he's pro ready, like Matt
Yeah.
Jones.
Yep, there's all of these, and now like the Patrick Mahomes is like the new style, the gunslinger that can do anything and throw any pass. That's like the new style, the Caleb Williams that everybody's looking for.
The Zach Wilson.
Yep. No, I put.
I mean, the four archetypes. That's what the four quarterbacks in this draft were. It's who's the improvisational who can throw it from any platform, and has done it on a national stage. Caleb, who's the big 6'5" or bigger with a cannon arm, who can potentially add to the running game because he's so big. May, who's the Lamar Jackson clone, Daniels, and who's the boring, accurate but find the right pass guy in McCarthy. Following kind of the Cousins and the Purdy archetype. So, I mean, it's you're right, RJ. This perfectly fits the mold for those quarterbacks and how they fit into kind of what the archetypes of the quarterbacks are today. And what's going to be great is three of these guys are going to completely miss.
Yep.
Or all 6 of them are going to hit, and the quarterback market's going to explode.
Who knows? But like, I think it's interesting. I think that's one of the few NFL trends that's kind of stuck around. Because like, go back to 2018, and like they had those same archetypes, and like teams were chasing those, and like they put 4 or 5 quarterbacks on a pedestal, and they were like, these are the best quarterbacks. These are all first round worthy.
Well,
they do that at a lot of positions too, though. Like at tight end, you go back and everyone wants their 6'7", 250, 260-pound tight end. And I can't remember the name of the Austin Safarian Jenkins to the Bucks in the second round. Oh, well, he hasn't really done too much, but he's 6'6", 6'7", 260, It
and
seems
I
like
think the reason you see those quarterback archetypes stick around is it does feel like there's usually like 4 to 6 teams that are at the top of the NFL that year, and at least 3 of those archetypes are represented at the top. You got the Lamar, you got the Josh Allen, you got the Mahomes, you got the pocket passer, Aaron Rodgers. He's kind of fallen off lately, obviously, but when the Packers were at the top, I mean, you had each of the different archetypes represented, and every team said, well, we can do something like that if we get that archetype.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some blasphemy. Okay, Rodgers is the before Josh Allen, the before Patrick Mahomes, before Caleb Williams is the improviser. Okay, he's old and now he's a pocket passer. But that dude was an improvising god.
True. He did have that like hyper accurate, put the ball through a pint glass kind of ability though, and I think people think about that more than the improvisation.
But ultimately, we were talking about this just based on like trends that like teams have, like what's hot right now, and like just the quarterback one stuck around. Like, I don't remember 5 years ago us like looking for the Iowa tight end every year.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, who was the first one? Who was that first big name Iowa tight end that blew up? Was that Hawkinson?
No.
Because you had Fant and Hawkinson at the same time.
They also produced what's his name? Isn't it Ebron from Iowa?
No, I thought it was Miami. No, joke is Miami.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
I don't think. No, Ebron wasn't Iowa, was he?
Let me look it up. I'm on my phone already.
No, he was not. He was North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah.
Kittle.
Yeah.
It was
I
George
want to say,
Kittle.
at least in recent memory. Sorry, who'd you say?
Kittle.
That's Kittle.
Oh, Kittle. Yeah.
That's what I said. You guys said no, it wasn't him.
No, I didn't say no. I was just trying to think of some. I felt like there might have been someone else before him too, though.
I had a thought. Yeah.
There might have been one before him, but they didn't hit like Kittle did.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
Kittle
know,
was
but
that insane yards after catch, can't tackle me that everybody wanted, and we're
Right.
going.
He started to change how we looked at tight ends because
Dallas
like
Clark.
okay.
that was okay.
A lot of tight ends we looked at, you have to wait like 3 or 4 years, and then like Kittle was the first of the ones where we're like, oh, like he can be an impactful player in the passing game like year one, and then like teams started to search those out, and we've gotten to the point where like the one in Buffalo, he was drafted and like game planned into that starting in week one, and
Yep.
like that wasn't a thing 5 years ago.
I think to a lesser degree, Laporta was as well. I think Detroit from the get-go was like, this guy is gonna be a part of our passing game.
Well,
Yeah.
part of it too is some of these college, some of these usage. It makes it a lot easier for translation when Iowa's got a certain offense. If you watch them every year, they do the same crap. Okay, you know what their tight ends have been taught to do. You know what they're capable of, and they happen to get really good tight end recruits that go there because there's been a lot of guys who've been successful coming out of there, and you see it all the time. That's why you have like DBU, and it's Ohio State and LSU and Alabama. They're always saying, "Well, we're DBU and we're DBU," and they're always producing great DBs. Some of it is definitely.
We've missed a few times recently in Columbus.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I have not been a fan of a couple of the DBs coming out of Columbus in the last couple of years. So.
Oh, yeah. I was as wrong can be in Okuda, and I will own that. I thought he was going to be a dog, and I could not have been wronger.
Well, you weren't the only one. I think a lot of people thought Okuda was very promising.
There were scouting was kind of veered away from the look for the lockdown corners for a few years, and they started to go for the guys that could battle with slot receivers, and then realized that's not how you draft franchise cornerbacks.
Yeah, well, you also have the issue too, to where for whatever reason, the rules are different between college and the pros. And one of the things, and Rory can even tell you, because I'm pretty sure I told him way back then, Okuda for me was just way too handsy at Ohio State. Like he relied on being physical, going up and down the field way too much for me, for being a guy being drafted top 3. Yeah, you can't do that with illegal contact rules. Like you just.
And that's been a concern for a lot of guys in recent years, where they've been kind of coming out, and one of the big knocks is like, oh, this guy uses his hands a lot. Can he adapt to that at the NFL level?
Yeah, like I really didn't like Witherspoon in last year's class because of that. For me, my top corner was Gonzo, which, we'll see how well he can play this year coming back healthy. I think he looked excellent for New England last year. I know you're probably excited to see him again, RJ. But when he went to Seattle and I knew he was going to be coached by Pete Carroll, I'm like, okay, never mind. He's got a great coach. He'll be fine.
He'll be just fine.
It's going to be okay. But no, I mean, that's going back to like, we were thinking about, we're talking about like the Chargers offense and stuff like that. Like, yeah, it's the tight ends. Palmer could really break out, and looks like he's got one of those lead roles there. But let's look at the last time Harbaugh was in the NFL. He had a pass catching, route specialist. Kind of sounds like Ladd McConkey to me. He had his, sure-handed bigger target, which I guess, could be one of the more guys right now. Ran the 2 tight ends and ran the shit out of the ball. Now, Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than he ever had in San Francisco, but it's a question of kind of worked for him in the NFL, and it kind of worked for him at Michigan. So does he do what worked for him in the NFL, or does he kind of say, well, you know what, that's not the team I have right now, so let's play the team I have right now?
I think Harbaugh he strikes me as a coach that's very adaptable. That being said, I think he is building towards that style of offense. He picked up 2 running backs in free agency. He got Kimani Vidal, at the end of the draft. He's got a lot of guys that he wants to run the ball with. He's got a lot of blockers. Drafted at Joe Alt, obviously, the best lineman in the class. I think with a little bit of luck, Harbaugh and the Chargers could see a little bit of a resurgence of the older style of football where the passing is reserved less for big blow-up plays, more, we just ran the ball 4 times in a row for 26 yards. Now we're going to open up something over the middle, make you think we're going to pass again, and then hand it off on some draw for another 15 yards. And then on the other side of the ball, we have 5 edge rushers we can put out there, and your quarterback's going to be running for his life.
I think what we're going to see is late Harbaugh at 49ers, where they had Kaepernick. I think we're going to see a lot of RPOs, simple reads, get the ball out. They're going to run the ball heavy, and they're going to play action, take deep shots.
Yeah.
They're not going to just come out on every first down, run the ball. He's smart. He understands. They did it a lot at Michigan. You got to have your change of pace. You got to keep teams off balance. They're going to be a very balanced team, but once they start running on you and you let them run on you, they're just going to run it down your throat. They'll run it 30 times in a row if you let them.
Yeah, and when you get, assuming health, obviously, when you get J.K. Dobbins and you get Gus Edwards and you get Isaiah Spiller, who granted to this point has not looked like anything special, but he's a grinder. You get all these guys on the field and you can hand the ball off 15 times to every one of them. There's nothing stopping you from running the ball 45, 50, 55 times in a game if a team flat out can't stop you. I have seen that happen to the Chargers for the last 3 years, and it sucks because it feels like you can't do anything to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I go to the things that have worked today, and I think one of the staples of the Shanahan offense, and obviously motion is one of them, but the second is running different plays out of the exact same look. That I can run 4 different running plays at you out of this look, but I can also hit you deep in 3 different ways. And it's the same personnel package, it's the same lineup. It's just, I'm giving you the same look, but it doesn't mean you know where I'm going with it. And I feel like Harbaugh is the master of that. Is, hey, I got, I'm in a 22 set right now, but you better keep those safeties deep.
Yeah. And I think when you have guys like Lad McConkey, Brennan Rice, Darius Davis, some of those guys that can take the top off of defense. And then on the underneath, you got Josh Palmer, he learned from Keenan Allen. He's not really going to drop the ball. He runs great routes. So if you don't have a good corner on him, well, then he's just going to get 12 or 13 yards easy.
Yeah, it's almost one of those where I feel like there's a couple teams like this year where it's like if I don't have like the quarterback, I'm not sure how excited I am to try and pick when they're going to be the big weeks for that guy in normal fantasy. Like, again, I love having exposure to, the Chargers because give me just the least expensive option. But then, take that up a level. Like, what do you do if you have one of these Texans receivers? Like, do you start Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and Stephon Diggs every single week?
Yep.
Are those automatic starters still? And if so, like, then CJ Stroud's automatically a top. Like, there's no way he can support all those receivers and not finish in the top 2.
Until we find out who the one that isn't worth starting, until we figure out that one, they're all startable receivers.
I think the biggest problem you're going to run into with those receivers is I haven't obviously watched the tape very much on these guys and compared them, but there's just a feeling that I get that Diggs and Dell run too much of the same stuff, and Diggs is just better at it. So I think if anyone's going to suffer, it's probably going to be Tank Dell. He's coming off of a gunshot wound, granted, apparently not a serious one, but that's already putting you at a disadvantage entering training camp. And you're smaller and lighter. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to predict, but I would guess Dell is the one that's the odd man out until Diggs is gone.
Well, to relate this back to the league, you have Buccaneers with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and they just paid Juwan Jennings, and they drafted a receiver in the 1st, and they drafted a receiver in the 4th. They also have Kittle. They have McCaffrey, and they performed very well last year. Are we going to see multiple years of it?
Well, I think the answer to that is someone's probably got to be on the move, right? I mean, are we really going to see Debo, Pearsall, Ayuk, Juwan, and uh, who was the last
Cohen. Jacob Cohen.
Yeah, Cohen. Are we going to see all those guys on the roster next year?
Yeah.
I don't know. Has Ayuk gotten his extension yet?
Not yet. He's going. So this year is the last ride. Like I've said this for a few years. Is we had our chance last year, and this is really our last chance at it. As soon as we have to pay Brock Purdy money, it all ends because that means we can't really extend anyone else. So now we're gonna have to shift our skill positions to these guys we just drafted, and sort of hope that Brock can elevate the offense with those guys like everyone else did with him when he was getting paid shit. But it's going to be, McCaffrey's probably going to be one of the first ones to go, if not one of these receivers. And, it'll be like pick one of sort of the McCaffrey, Ayuk, Debo, and, those guys, the big four, that maybe only one of them stays on the team to retire.
Yeah. As a Niners fan, who do you think Pearsall plays more like, Debo or Ayuk?
I'm not sure he actually sees the field much this year.
Because I don't know why, but he feels more like a gadget player, like a Debo. So if anyone was on his way out, being 28, 29, not much of an injury history, but definitely a more demanding role, I feel like he would be the odd man out, no? You'd look to extend Brandon Ayuk, who's a very efficient route runner, and he's great with separation. He's got reliable hands. And then you take the guy that'll run the ball 8 times a game and then catch some and then also just do jet sweeps and just replace him with Pearsall.
But Debo, I don't know. Debo's built different. Like he's one of those like irreplaceable type of players. Like yes, he's a gadget player, but like he's also a wide receiver one that you can like lean on.
I don't know if I consider him wide receiver one over Ayuk.
I would. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's not the number one option there.
He's got wide receiver one impact on a game.
Sure,
right.
I can give you. Yeah, I can agree with that.
That's what happens.
But like normally the gadget players are, players that can get you like chunk yardage, but aren't like super impactful like every down. And like he's like one of the few that is like always impactful.
I agree with that. I just when you look at it, when you compare both players and you say, oh, you can only have one. One of them is like 2 or 3 years younger. He's a better route runner, a better catcher, a better separator. He can't do as much as Debo, and he doesn't blow up in the same way as Debo does. But if you're going to already have McCaffrey for big plays and Kittle for big plays, and you got this new kid Pearsall who runs like a 4.3, what do you run, a 4.38 or something? I would prefer to give up the guy that's a little older, that's not quite as good at some of the premier wide receiver things. Because I think Brandon Ayuk led the league, was it last year or 2 years ago, in yards of separation by like 2 yards or something?
Well, and that's the thing. It's so one of the things that I've figured out, I feel like recently is right now we're all thinking like dynasty owners. We're thinking like we're playing Madden or we're managing our dynasty team or stuff like that. Well, he's getting up in the age. This is the age apex in terms of his value. So now is when I need to trade him. The 49ers are thinking like, this is my last chance probably to have all of this team together and make a run at the Super Bowl. Because after this year, Trent's gone. We're probably losing some of these skill players. We're going to have to probably shed some of the defense because we won't be able to pay all of them. Stuff like that. And it's going to be all that money's going to Brock. And dear God, I hope we develop players well. So that's what's going to happen. But we also don't have to make those decisions about who does Pearsall look better with until after the season.
Yeah.
So why rush that decision if we don't have to?
Yeah, I think they shouldn't rush it. I think the best thing for them to do is to tag and trade at the end of the year. And, when you look at it, the best way to build around a young quarterback is, what Buffalo just had to do and what Kansas City did a couple years ago. Get a lot of draft picks. So if somebody's willing to give you enough for one of these receivers, they would have done it this offseason. So, and he would have been gone, and they would have drafted a bunch more young guys to help them fill in and be ready for the future. Maybe we can tag him and still get some fair compensation back for him, but we'll see.
Here's the dynasty owner in me coming out a little bit. This was never really ever explored because I think if it had been done, the fan base would riot and everybody would, and the GM would be fired immediately and it'd just be over. Has anyone considered, you have Brock Purdy, super cheap. He looks good in the Shanahan system, yes. But you now know Shanahan is capable of taking nearly any quarterback and making them look good. Do you ship Brock Purdy for like 5 first-round picks and just retool your entire offense?
Because no team's paying that.
No team's paying that.
If Russell can go for 2 firsts and 2 seconds at what?
That
Was
is
he 33 at the time?
That is the max that any team will ever pay as far as like draft capital, like in today's times. Nobody's paying more than 2 firsts and 2 seconds, and I don't think a team will, like, for the next few years.
I think if you're honestly going to give something like that up for a Brock Purdy, I'd rather trade it for Sean McVay or for Kyle Shanahan. I'd rather trade for the coach than the quarterback at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the better way to do it. If you can turn anything into gold, then I'd rather have, King Midas than the gold that he's selling.
Yeah. Hey, Kyle, how are you doing? Would you like to come down to New Orleans? We'll give you $20 million a year to coach down here, and we'll give the Niners 2 first-round picks. Come down to New Orleans.
I know we've gotten to the point where there are more splashy trades happening in the like real NFL, but I don't think we're at a point where like young quarterbacks are getting moved unless they are failed projects, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I hate to do this, but we're 47 minutes in. Podcast titled after Brock Purdy, and we haven't talked about the Brock Purdy trade yet. We probably have to shift some gears here.
It took 44 minutes for us to even say Brock Purdy's name.
That's a fair point. Let's talk Brock Purdy.
All right, so
he's overpaid.
He's the gift that keeps on giving, man. It went from who in God, like what in God's name is Purdy going to go for in free agency? And we all picked a number, and we were all under on what we thought. And then goes, and it's he's not moving anywhere, and he's moved 7 times this offseason?
Somehow. Yeah.
Insanity.
Let me scroll up in chat because I posted the transaction. So Pats signed him in free agency, for restricted free agency, and traded him to me. I traded him to Cardinals. Cardinals traded him to Giants. Giants traded him back to Patriots. Patriots traded him to Bears, who traded him to me, who traded him to the Texans, who traded him to the Dolphins now. So he has, since he's been signed, moved 9 times. $116 million quarterback has been traded 9 times.
I mean, there's got to be no free agent in our league's history that's ever moved that much after being signed. It's just in the offseason. That's insane.
God.
It'd be a lot cooler if every time you guys traded him, you guys kept a little bit of the dead cap.
Spread the dead cap around.
Yeah, it's where he's like a $30 million quarterback now. That'd be great.
After 9 moves, he's just regular salary.
Yeah. There we go. The dead. If we had dead cap that we kept, like you said, James, that okay, well, I now have negative $780 million in dead cap, so all I can sign are minimum players and/or rookies, and that's the team I'm fielding for the next 4 years.
I meant
Don't
more like
do it.
spread the cap out. Like, hey, I'll take that player from you, but you have to keep 20 million of that contract.
Well, and the thing I love, and the deal that went down here was, and we'll get to the rest of the trades actually this time too, was Brock Purdy for Ryan Tannehill, 49ers 25 first, New Orleans 25 second, the Commanders 25 second, my 25 third, and Commanders 25 third. So these are all, I'd say, picks on teams that have ambiguous playoff aspirations this year. I think there's always the concern when it's one of my picks that I might flip my team on its head and go the other direction because, I've only done it 7 times. But again, like 49ers, who knows what's going to happen in the NFC West this year? If the Seahawks look like a juggernaut, maybe they will be. Maybe 49ers still have a path to the wild card. Saints tore his team down to literally just picks, built it back up, and now seems to be potentially tearing it down again. Commanders, you're here too. Who knows what the hell you're going to end up doing based off of the rest of the offseason. You still have your pick, so you can be pretty flexible with it. But there's, I feel like the decision has been
Trying
made.
to play it slow in contrast to what I've done other years. Trying to conserve my picks and see how much value I can squeeze out instead of jumping on the first offer, which has been my MO the last few years.
That's fair. I feel like, patience can be a virtue on this one. But I feel like that patient approach means that, okay, NFC East is going to be a scary place, it looks like, next year. So there's value in saying, well, I'm not going to necessarily be the best in that division, but I'll bide my time. But at the same time, like, you've got some pretty nice pieces and some pretty productive pieces, say, at the defensive end position. So unless you found a way to run the NASCAR package, might have some challenges there. But again, like you said, you're still trying to squeeze the value from the team that we're at the point where people aren't trying to start teams to play each other yet. Like, okay, I need to add a DN because, I don't have a good one yet. Well, can play games in 3 months, 3.5 months. Like, you got time.
Yeah, the sense of urgency as far as people needing specific positions comes into play, I'd say probably July. So we got a little ways to go until people come knocking at the door, I guess.
So, and I told Texans this after the trade went down. Like, and I think I said this on a podcast when I traded Brock. For me, I was using where J.J. McCarthy was going to go in the draft as a benchmark for Brock's value. Compared to him a lot, and from just a player value perspective in Dynasty, would I rather have Brock Purdy or J.J. McCarthy? And I think I probably have Brock Purdy. Contract.
You mean contract included?
I was going to say including the $117 million.
No.
Okay, I was
I was going to question your judgment there.
If Brock Purdy was on a $30 million deal.
Gotcha. Okay.
A contract more commensurate with the level of player he is. If it was just comparing sort of the contract they should have based on where they are in their careers, who would I rather take, JJ or Purdy? And I think I'd rather take Purdy. So JJ 108 in our league, so that means 108 would be kind of the last thing I would take for Purdy. Now, I did mention the elephant in the room, which is the big-ass contract. So in a league like ours, how much does that discount the player? Is it to nothing, like James has mentioned, that no player with that contract of that value is worth it? Or is it a couple picks? Is it a round? I feel like that's how the deals keep getting done. Is hey, we can stack enough stuff on the other side of the balance to make it worth it in terms of dollars and cents, but can you still have sort of the intrinsic 108 value in doing so? And I think that's been the difference in the trades that we've liked and the ones that we haven't.
Yeah, he has everything going for him other than that contract, like in this league, and that's why he still like has good value. He's productive. He's young. You have control of his contract, like meaning you can extend him for as long as you want, as long as you can afford him. I mean, I guess any player's like that. But yeah, you just have to renegotiate him. But like he's what 24, 25 years old. Like those are the things that make him still worth like a first plus. Is he's a 24-year-old starting quarterback that has been to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but the counter argument to it is it's 116 million. Can you compete with 116 million dollars on one player?
No,
out of your 40 roster spots, you can't. So
yeah,
there are already
140 and they're 116 and competing. I think you have to approach it from the range of I'm going to own this player after I renegotiate him, and that's my intention to compete.
Yep.
So at like 60.
But you have to renegotiate this player twice before he becomes even league average.
Okay, I can put it to you like this. I would have loved to have had Brock Purdy last year when I was tanking. Like, I would have loved that contract, all of it.
I get that, but the other reality of it is, though, if you're not a tanking team, he has no value to you because you cannot win with that contract. So if he's only valuable to tanking teams, that reduces the market. If your market's reduced, it already reduces the amount the player's worth because there's fewer buyers.
Sure. But
so then you have to fully believe in that quarterback, right, to even want him. And then on top of that, if he has a Pro Bowl year, it blows up in your face, and it's another 2 years further out before you can even renegotiate him down. Like, he is just way too much of a gamble, way too much of a risk. People can have fun with it. It's just, to me, it's just silly fun.
Yeah, of course, but it's the perfect silly fun gamble that a team like Dolphins, who has such an obscene amount of picks, can do.
I definitely don't hate that he has them. It's just yeah. Like when Giants had him, it was just like, bro, why? Yeah. There's no reason whatsoever for him to ever have touched your roster. Why is he there?
I have no issue with any team that acquired him in the offseason because we have a long offseason. We can do a lot of things, and we like a half decent team can just decide, all right, well, I got Brock for a really good price. I still have my first. I'm just gonna tank. I'm gonna sell off the rest of my team. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And some of the teams probably that thought didn't go through their head, and they thought, well, maybe I can make it work and be a half decent team, and then after I renegotiate him, I have $60 million to do stuff with next off season. And then they realize that it is more of a burden than they expected. But like, I don't have any issue with any team that acquired it in the off season. Like, sure, I might not have liked the value, but if they felt that it was good value and they felt like they could do something with it and ultimately decided they couldn't and wanted to sell it off, that's why we have a long off season.
Well, the fun part now is Dolphins has him, and Dolphins meets the criteria I put in for who makes a good Purdy owner this offseason. It's someone who is, as you mentioned, James, tanking, and has control of their own pick and is likely acquiring picks, and this is their opportunity to. And we all know, as we've had to pull a team together from picks, one of the toughest things to do is get a quarterback, because if you want to go for the big guys, we're talking multiple first. And if you only have a couple to build a team with, it's really hard to spend 2 or 3 on just one guy. But on the other side, it's if I only want to spend a single first or a second, I'm going after the Kirk Cousins of the world. And that seemed like a really good idea 3 months ago. Now, maybe not so much.
I think the Chargers is one of the few teams in the league that could truly take Brock Purdy and compete with him because they have so many picks. I think that's one of the teams that could go out and buy a bunch of rookie contract studs and be able to compete with them. You could go get. Has someone extended Amon Ra yet? Because I think JJ is still.
Amon Ra's been paid.
Oh, we're too late into the off
Here
season.
yet.
Yeah.
Everybody's been paid, all the big names.
No.
Yeah.
Well, then you'd have to go get the next guys like Puka and
I think we're too late in the off season to see
Marvin.
fireworks like that.
Well, yeah,
Well,
it'd be tough.
Well, the other part of this Purdy trade is, though, the Texans has the tools and they have the ammo to load up the win. And, he needs to start working on it. It feels like sooner rather than later, because Devontae and Jamar, when extended, is going to take up about $45 million in cap space, and he's got to extend them this year at some
I have
point.
made him so many offers to relieve that problem, but you don't want him.
I mean, in my opinion, right now, he's just selling off all his picks and trying to buy some of the most expensive players in the league at like discounted prices. Just my opinion.
You think that's what you should do?
I don't know. But yeah, I would definitely. I'd go out and I'd ask about like a Nate Landman if he's going to be reasonably priced. I'd inquire about like Leonard Floyd, Carl Granderson.
Yeah, guys like Ayuk, guys like Mike Evans, maybe Keenan.
Well, his offense is good enough. Like, if Aiden O'Connell is the starter in Las Vegas, and if Darren Waller retires, for that AFC South, for how weak it is, his offense is good enough to compete. Maybe not outright win it, but it's definitely good enough to compete. The issue is he has no defense outside of linebacker.
Actually, I take that back. If I'm Texans right now, I'm waiting until we find out who the starter is, and if Sam Darnold's the starter in Minnesota, I'm going to get him, and then I can build out the rest of my team with the extra $40 million or so.
I would be very shocked if Darnold started over JJ.
I'm just saying, like, if Texans wants to compete and he wants to feel a little bit more secure at quarterback, you go up. Like, sure, it's not the best one, but it's real. Like, he's probably far more reasonably priced than the rest of the starters in this league. Yeah. So, like, you go out and you do that, and that's basically none of your draft capital, and then you use the rest of your draft capital to buy other expensive guys.
Well, the other part of it too, though, how expensive is Minshew actually? Like, he could just go get Minshew and own the Raiders QB room for the year.
I think selling to the Texans.
Minshew, good for you.
Yeah.
You might be shocked to hear this, but after being an AOC truther, I may have tried to acquire Minshew 1 or 17 times. And you'll be shocked to hear, I think I maybe got 2 declines and the rest either expired or just...
What do you mean? The Falcons is an inactive owner that everyone said could win the South last year, but then just sat there and didn't make any trades? What? Shocker. No.
Shocker. Ironically for the Texans, if he was looking to acquire highly productive, expensive veterans on defense, I mean, the godfather of that is currently on the call.
That's true.
That's why I mentioned Nate Landman first.
Well, I mean, I am one of them, yes, but also the Commanders owns a $20 million Nick Bosa, an $18 million Miles Garrett and a $12 million Quiddy Pay, and then a
Oh, you're not.
$9.5 million.
Yeah, but you're not getting a discount in value on those guys.
No.
Their production outweighs their expensive cap, so there's no actual discount.
I guess that's true. I think Miles Garrett probably goes for a little bit cheaper than what you would expect for a 230 million or 230 point DN, just because he's going to be 29 next year in the season, and you know he's only got 2 years left on his deal.
Oh no, but
long as his-
What?
I agree with that statement, but I think that's more just the top tier of defensive ends have kind of like aged out. Like they're all not 25 anymore; they're all 28.
29.
So
30.
yeah, so like all of the super valuable ones, the Trey Hendrickson, the Miles Garrett's.
I got Brian Burns in that category.
Montez Sweat, Carl
Montez Sweat
Granderson,
is
Commanders,
super.
yeah.
Rashawn
Nick
Gary is
Bosa.
taking a huge step back.
Isn't Brian Burns like 25?
Yeah, I know. I'm just
Okay.
saying, like
I
in
don't
regards
say
of like
Burns.
productive and has a reasonable contract for 25 and a productive GM, $9.5 million to me is like nothing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, like so now I think we're probably in a world just where like if Brian Burns got traded, I'd be surprised if he was cheaper than Miles Garrett. But like that I still don't view that as like a drastic discount on what Miles should be going for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep. And going back to it, I mean, just like we were talking about, did the influx of really good young receivers over the last couple of years change evaluation of the position for receiver? I'd say it's the same thing for DNs. Like if you think about the DN rooms across the league, like there's probably 25 or 30 like people we would probably consider good to very good DNs in this league, if not great. And it's kind of like, well, because of that depth, any one of those, like probably of those 30 DNs, 20 have a shot to be the top scorer in any given year, but it's a hell of a lot more likely for 5 of them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes, I think that is because we are finally at the point where we have almost situational like rushers. We have guys that are specifically like rotation guys, like small amount of snaps, high productivity.
Kind of like Yannick Ngakwe was for years.
Yep.
Yeah.
and Josh
Uh,
Uche now in New England.
Yep.
Yeah,
So a lot of that has kind of evolved. So yeah, I do think there are a lot more opportunities, and the young guys get a lot more opportunities, so they stick around, and they're more likely to be relevant names for multiple years.
All right. Should we talk some trades here, or as mentioned during my visit to the Shadow Realm last week, I don't think we probably got as far into the trades as we should have. So help me out here, RJ. So that was what, Wednesday last week?
Yeah. So what was it? I had it on 8, and that is correct on the amount of days. But if we go back to, I think it's 10, is probably the correct thing to discuss. So I know we discussed the T. Higgins and a little bit of the Jonathan Taylor. I think the Tajay is where we started to veer off.
All right. We'll pick it up there. Tajay for the Panthers, 26, first, second. I'm sorry, his first, RJ's second that year, and Panthers' fourth that year. I think people thought that was probably too much for Tajay. I probably shared that I disagree, and think at the end of this year, we're gonna turn around and say, hey, why is Tajay Spears, top on RB1? How much did Panthers pay to get him? And this is going to be great value.
I'm not the biggest fan of the trade, but I also wasn't the biggest fan of what was it, Achan going for a first last year, and that was completely incorrect on my part. So there's a possibility that the same thing happens here. Like there might be even a higher possibility because we have a year of knowing that Tennessee likes Tajay.
Yep. I don't know. Kind of touch on any additional ads or
No, I'm kind of in the same line. I don't think his value is where that trade is. I think I received some very similar offers from you, Mike, and
Yeah.
rejected them. But just because my belief that I think he's personally a flash in the pan.
yeah, that's fine. But there's more reliable running backs out there, like Jonathan Taylor and George Kittle for Leonard Fournette, Will Disley, and the Jets 25. Jets for second this year and next year. So 2 1s, 2 2s, and dumping the Fournette contract for Jonathan Taylor and George Kittle.
I love this for the Jets.
I just love this trade in general. I love how it's made up. I love how it works for everybody, and everyone accomplishes what they want in it. There's the added benefit of the Disley contract for Saints as almost an afterthought thrown in there, but it could be something that returns some extra value. Again, if we did an award show for trades of the year, a trade like this might be my nominee just because of how it's put together.
I mean, is Jonathan Taylor really worth that little?
I think injuries have played a big part in his value.
Yeah, Kittle was 1 first, and then Taylor was a first and 2 seconds.
Yeah, I guess
Kittle's 30, and JT has a lengthy injury history already.
Yeah.
About 25 years old.
Last year he didn't win. The injuries weren't a thing last year. It was a contract dispute that was spun out as an injury. I would have imagined that you could get 2 firsts out of JT. He's young. Yes, his contract's fairly big, but he is not that far removed from being the top fantasy running back in the NFL. And he's on a team that's locked him up. There's not a lot of running backs that have gotten contracts from the team.
So call it 2 firsts for Taylor and 2 seconds for Kittle.
Yeah, and then Will Disley to go along with Hayden Hurst for the Chargers tight end room. So you get the Chargers tight end room, 2 seconds for Kittle and 2 firsts for JT.
I was not a fan of this last week, and I've started to like it for both sides.
I don't think it's egregious or anything. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying someone got ripped off. I just thought that, at the very least, like split into 2 parts. I would have thought you would have gotten combined at least 3 firsts. I guess Disley makes up some of the difference, but I would have thought Kittle would have been worth a late first. And I would have thought JT would have been worth at least 2 mid firsts.
If it's 2 seconds, or they're worth a first. Like when we're so far out, like it seems reasonable. Like obviously, I don't expect people to just go out and sell their first for 2 seconds, but roughly they are worth about the same.
I suppose so, and it's tough too because it's all offensive pieces, and generally speaking, there's going to be a lot higher value put on offensive pieces. Even though Kittle's old and JT's got some injury history, you're still talking about 2 premier positions.
Yeah, but we're post-draft. Everybody has full rosters now, so you can't just freely send out trades anymore. Like sometimes they just don't work, and like the people with the draft capital that can pay what you actually want just can't take those anymore. So you kind of you have to go with what works. Like don't get me wrong, I don't think that he was shopping these around and struggling to find buyers or anything. But the market post-draft is far different than pre-draft.
Oh, for sure. No, I agree with that.
I was a mouse click away from getting those 2 on my team, actually. The price was just a little too steep for me.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, too, with guys of that caliber. I mean, I would be shocked if the price wasn't high.
Yes. No, I didn't expect it to be low, but it was just I think he was squeezing out a little too much, but I think the value works for both sides in that trade.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking how much fun the East would have been if they would actually went to the commies. That would have been.
Well, I mean, when I got my 26 picks, I definitely thought about just offering all of my draft picks for Taylor. I might have even sent that, and probably realized that I couldn't make the cap work at all. But I would have loved to have tried to get Jonathan Taylor. So, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would have liked to have been in that. But good on Jets for moving into the contenders as far as Bengals rankings. So that's cool.
I think the other thing that makes Kittle worth probably more than a lot of people expect is that contract. That contract is gold.
I mean, it's nice, but
It kind of doesn't matter anymore.
yeah.
I mean, that's my thing on both these players, and I've had both these players on my team this offseason, so it's going to sound a little hollow.
I think you've had like
JT
half the league on your team this offseason.
What the hell, dude? How do you get all these players cycling back and forth?
Shit happens. But
This is why I
the thing
enjoy this league.
I realized about these players recently is 3 years ago, the valuation on these guys just made a ton of sense. Like, I had Jonathan Taylor in my head when I owned him this season. I wanted the 108 or better for him. Like, that was kind of where I felt he needed to be in valuation in a deal. And Kittle, I was looking for a mid-teen first for him, kind of in the same range as like what people were looking for Mark Andrews. Like, that's what I was looking for valuation of those players. And that's probably a dead-on fair valuation of those players 2 years ago. Probably not right now. Because I think, there's an old saying of sometimes, would you rather be a year too early on a player or a year too late? And maybe the Saints is a year too early on moving these guys. But again, and I said this at the beginning of the show, and this is the easiest thing I can do as a podcast host and as a prognosticator of this stuff is take both sides. But I love both players, and I think both should have good seasons. But would it shock you if Taylor had, call it 950 yards because he spent, he missed 7 games, so gets 950 yards and 8 touchdowns, and the Colts miss the playoffs again? Is he still going to the 108? Or, Taylor logged a lot of mileage in college, and he's had some injury issues recently, and he's probably worth a late first now. Like, we're a year away from that potentially happening.
I agree.
I think, you say it can't happen. I mean, not the same player at all, but kind of Joe Mixon. I feel like that's going to happen with his career. And Kittle is the same kind of thing. Is, hey, he's starting to hit that golden age for tight end where you start to break down.
I mean, I don't disagree. The only thing for Taylor specifically that I would say is I don't think he's a year too early, but just waiting until you get a good 3 good games out of Taylor and then moving him probably maximizes that value a little bit more. Yeah. But you could, if he starts off the year poorly or gets hurt, then yeah, you're just screwed.
Well, you also run into the issue there, though, with the market. All the 25 picks are owned by Dolphins, so act fast while you can still get a 25 or 26 pick, right? So
that's going to change.
Yeah.
We've already seen Dolphins start to dip into his stash here, and I think we're going to see some strategic moves here where he takes advantage of being the big stack at the table before anyone else either A, builds it up, or B, doesn't have the flexibility to make a move. Because some teams are right up against it years-wise. I think that starts to work itself a little bit as we start getting injuries and things of that nature. Not a lot of teams are in cap hell right now, so there's still some flexibility there. But I think if you're going to make a move and strategically buy. This is kind of the window's not closed yet, but the bar is playing closing time. All right, Trey Tucker for Braylon Allen. Thank you, Saints, for jumping on the Braylon Allen grenade. I like the player, I like the talent, but I have a feeling Goose was kind of talking him up to about half the league, saying, "You should totally take this guy. He's worth way more than the draft pick. Give me this."
Is there anyone here that didn't receive an offer from Goose for Braylon Allen?
I didn't.
Okay, that's
Congratulations.
I feel like this is the Regina George scene in Mean Girls, where it's is anyone here not afraid of Regina George?
who here has been victimized by Goose?
Yeah.
Well, I've been victimized by Goose, just not for Braylon Allen.
Who else here received a Braylon Allen offer from Goose, and everyone shamefully puts their hand up?
On a positive note, Brees Hall did bang up his knee, so Braylon Allen is getting a little bit more looks.
Define bang up. I haven't seen that news yet.
He was
just signed Tariq Cohen too.
He was working one-on-ones yesterday after one of the walkthroughs, and just did something to his knee.
Okay.
Look, if he actually misses time with a hurt knee, if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I just retire right now.
See you later.
Well, wasn't Aaron Rodgers rubbing a cheeseburger on his foot or something?
Yeah, I mean, right now, anything you hear is just a lot of crap, unless somebody tears their ACL or something like.
Yeah, like the Kyron Williams news. It's okay, he's got a foot issue.
Michael Pittman banged knees with one of the defensive backs, and he was he was done for the day. So, but none of that stuff's important. It's just interesting when you see people respond on Twitter and they're like, "Oh, Braylon Allen stocks up."
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the Xavier Howard sleeps with another Miami Dolphin player's girlfriend. That's what I'm waiting for.
Jesus, man.
No, but nobody's responded to the other one, so I think they're just going to stop publishing those.
Throwback to the Antonio Brown sleeping with Tom Brady's wife and all that nonsense.
What about the Golden Tate sleeping with Russell Wilson's girlfriend?
That too. Oh God.
Speaking of camp news, who I had some interest in trading for him, and then I kind of faded off because I couldn't find any news. It is shocking that the Panthers have not had a single news article about Jonathan Mingo in the mini camp this year.
It's a sign of things to come.
That's what I'm
Mingo.
Buy Xavier Leggett. Buy him now.
I've tried.
Hey, who owns Xavier Leggett?
I have no idea.
Oh, what a coincidence! Oh my goodness! Oh,
is it the Dan Snyder team? What?
I mean, let's put it this way: Mingo was a second-round pick. Leggett's a first-round pick. So.
True.
Adam Thielen was a free agent. Even better.
Who can argue with that logic?
What, a third? What did they get Johnson for?
Sorry, that was just a clap back at Mike from last week. Or was it last week? 2 weeks ago, maybe.
Oh, man. I love it.
I listened in, Mike. I wasn't here, but I listened in. I loved it.
Yeah, I did not like any of those picks.
I love the hate. Love the hate.
You didn't like any of the Panthers picks?
Commanders picks.
Oh, Commanders picks.
Commanders picks.
Commanders. He had a stretch of three receivers. I was like, okay, I'm trying to get in.
Pearsall, Leggett, and what the fuck's his name?
Polk.
Yeah.
That guy.
Someone else.
The guy on the team that I hate.
I love Leggett, but mostly because I'm entertained by his interviews.
Look, Rory, I know I sound like that, but having the ability to just have that on call, I feel like that's some kind of abuse. But yeah, I understand.
It's my
If I had to
soundboard, guys.
guess, I'm guessing that Polk is the standout of the three.
Over Baker and Leggett?
Over Leggett and Pearsall.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the thing with that. I disagree only on the basis of Leggett has a lot of DK Metcalf qualities, and Dave Canales got DK's best year out of him. I would be I like Leggett a lot. I think that Canales could really turn that guy to a stud.
I mean, he did have a midget quarterback running that offense too. So
You're talking about the Seahawks offense? You're talking about the
yeah,
Yeah, no, Russell.
yeah, midget quarterback.
No, I know. I agree with that, but I mean, let's be honest. I don't think Bryce Young's struggles last year were because of his own, talent deficiencies. I think there's a lot of problems like the O-line and the actual offense itself. And let's be honest, if you can make Baker Mayfield, who was on 3 teams in a year, look like a top 10 quarterback, I have quite a bit of faith in you turning a number 1 overall pick into at least a decent looking quarterback.
Wait. You're telling me an offense on a 4th and 7 on a 1-score game shouldn't call a screenplay in the
No, I
4th
think that's a
quarter?
good idea, actually. I think that's a good idea. Yeah,
I don't see how that could go wrong.
Especially on like 10 plus yards out, I think that's probably the best thing to call. Starting the play behind the line of scrimmage is usually ideal when you need to gain a lot of yards.
So I appreciate this extended conversation on this because someone made the comment of like Aaron Rodgers rubbing a hamburger on his foot or something like that. Was it last year or the year before that Aaron Rodgers officially entered the Tyson zone?
Entered the what?
Tyson zone?
I would say last year. It's gotten rapidly worse, though.
Yeah,
It's the Tyson zone.
Tyson zone is Bill Simmons' idea that if you from the 1980s to now, if you wrote any news article about Mike Tyson doing something ridiculous, people would probably believe it. Like, I don't know what article you'd have to write about what Aaron Rodgers did of the outrageous or ridiculous variety for him to be like, no, he didn't do that.
Okay, then my follow-up question is, if you're saying 2 years ago, are you including after the darkness retreat and the ayahuasca?
No, that was what kicked it off there.
Okay, I would say starting from that moment, that's he's in the Tyson zone for sure. Aaron Rodgers decided to lock himself in McDonald's 3 days in a row and serve people free food.
Yeah. Aaron Rodgers has added stopping at a certain Taco Bell at 4 a.m. the night before every game as part of his tradition. He goes in, orders 3 soft tacos and a chalupa, eats them, destroys one of the bathrooms, and goes home and sleeps before the game.
And he orders specifically Mountain Dew Baja Blast with 2 ice cubes.
Yeah, Jets on 3-game losing streak because Taco Bell runs out of fire sauce.
Yes, that's 100% the Tyson. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers has been in the Tyson zone for 2 years for sure.
As a Bills fan, I'm just gonna miss all of the Aaron Rodgers miraculously recovers from a Achilles rupture. Is planning on playing in 2 weeks.
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I think if the Jets come week 14, if the Jets had 1 or 2 more wins, he probably comes back. I honestly think he shows
Achilles
up
injuries.
Quarterback, I think, is especially pocket passer quarterback. I think is one of the few positions you can probably get away with sending a guy.
Quarterbacks are bouncing on their toes the entire time in the pocket.
Yeah, but we've watched Manning throw footballs in a Super Bowl where he couldn't grip the laces anymore.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
I think if it comes to a Super Bowl, he would have been out there, playoff time. Whether it looked pretty at all, probably not. But would it have looked better than Zach Wilson? Probably.
Yeah. I mean, we're also talking about the Jets in the Super Bowls. This is all fantasy world.
For sure. Let's be honest, too. When you have an injury like that, yes, playing on it greatly exacerbates your chance of re-injuring it. But at that point, if you're able to run on it, if it's been, 6 months at that point? No, not even. It was 4 months, right?
He's also 41?
Yeah, I know. But if it's attached and you have a degree of healing, if you're gentle on it, you probably have a chance of being able to still make the same throws that you make every other time. It just comes down to like if he gets tackled wrong or if he tries to push off wrong and they snap again. But if he's just sitting back there making throws, not getting hit, the chance he can make those throws fine. But you're playing with fire at that point.
I don't know. My best thing about Aaron Rodgers is now he's Bill's problem.
Yeah. Well, what is it? All I want to know is two things. One, where does one find the sound of whales menstruating in case I hurt myself and need to have that as an additional healing method, as apparently that helped Aaron Rodgers recover faster. And my now big concern is if they provide that sound at the right frequency that JJ McCarthy meditates to before every game, I think we may have just unlocked God mode. I don't know. They're not all winners. Let's keep moving here. So, some big deals here involving Colts. So I'm glad he's on. So he picked up a couple of pretty solid pieces here and has transformed those. T. Higgins, his second 26 and third and 26 for Roman Wilson, Junior Colson, and the Saints 25 fourth. A fun trade.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy with it. I think Junior Colson certainly has the capability and honestly the likelihood of being a top 10 middle linebacker for the foreseeable future. Obviously, being a Chargers fan, I was very excited to get him. He's one of those guys that just strikes me as, I hate using the word foolproof, but I kind of have to in this instance. You have a guy who was already very highly regarded coming out of college, going into a system he literally played in college with two coaches that coached him throughout his college career. And then he's surrounded by defensive veterans. Derwin James, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Denzel Perryman. You got all these guys that's surrounding him, giving him good advice. And you got Jesse Minter and Harbaugh, obviously. And it feels like it's almost foolproof, barring injury and stuff. That's just my opinion. As a Chargers fan, I'm biased, I know already. But I absolutely love the guy to death. And then Roman Wilson strikes me as one of those Deontay Johnson replacements. He could go out there this year. I don't think he will, but this year he could go out there and vacuum up 100 targets and just be the second dude on the team and just catch a bunch of balls. Because, I don't know, there's not really a whole lot that I like when it comes to the Steelers passing game, personally.
All right. Well, that was Colt's opportunity to pitch that part of the stuff he's acquired. Let's move him over to the other part of the big stuff he's acquired. Brian Thomas, Zion McCollum, and Elijah Molden for Josh Palmer, Wandale Robinson, Robert Woods, Chris Braswell, and Cam Hart. So, Thomas, I feel like, was one of those guys that Colts got. Like, I almost felt like he was going to be in the Laporta zone, to be honest. That Colts got him, and he just wasn't going to move at all until, he potentially established himself as the cream of the crop that was better than what everyone else thought, and that's when he was going to sell him and extract the value. So, I wasn't sure that Brian was going to, have that kind of jump like Laporta did last year, but it kind of felt like that was in that zone this year. So, I was surprised to see him go for this, but I felt like this is probably a pretty good diversification value.
Well, I'll just comment on it quickly because I don't have a whole lot to say about this. I am not a very big fan of owning offensive pieces of Jacksonville. I've never really been interested in going for ETN. I moved Trevor Lawrence in my Dynasty League last year. Christian Kirk he's solid, but doesn't blow your socks off. I just don't like owning Jacksonville players. So, with the opportunity to split him into three pieces that I would honestly start or move for startable pieces, I just went for it. I mean, Braswell will probably be a starter, and Wandale and Palmer would have started for my team if I had to move Palmer. So, that's what I got.
Additional thoughts?
I want Braswell back.
Can't have him. He's mine. I got all the young edges.
Right. Well, then this is a fun little idea here. So Ravens has been kind of repopulating, I think it's 26 picks into 25 picks in creative ways. And here he picks up the Pats 25 and 26 second for his 26 first and 26 third. So depending on where you think those seconds are going to fall, and depending on where you think the Ravens are going to fall in 2 years, it's a interesting little scratch off ticket that it's probably not going to be your Mega Millions, one that has terrible odds, but the odds of payoff on this one are murky at best.
Give me New England's picks every day.
Yeah, I feel like he's one of the few teams that could pull this off. I don't think I'd have the same luck offering my 25 and 26 seconds for first and a third. Saints breaking down Sam Howell, Jerome Ford, and Jalen Phillips. And like I mentioned, for Carson Wentz, Sullivan Ahmed, Jeff Wilson, Victor D, and the Giants' 26 draft class. Like I had mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily fear, but I look for trends based off of year-over-year behavior of owners. Last year, Giants made a trade like this, and in return, he got Devon Achane, and I thought, what an idiot! He's doing all this for a guy who went 115. Like, he's taking the wrong guy in the wrong situation. Just what's this guy thinking? Devon Achane returned more than that value, so. I don't know who it is in this group, but if it's
Howell.
someone's going to overperform here beyond what we think.
I think it's Sam Howell. I mean, you've already got Geno, and then you've got the guy that could be extended right now for, I don't know, 10 or 15 or $20 million. But at the end of the day, you have a guy that's proven that he can start at the NFL level, if not all that well, going to a team that is notorious for being quarterback friendly. And Geno's 33 and expensive in real life. So, I mean, either you have a under the sub-$1 million starter and Geno, or Sam Howell takes over and suddenly you have a 24-year-old that is starting for you and is only, $20 million probably? 25?
I kind of see it as a scratcher. You get 3 guys that could be worth a first or more, but will they be? And the likelihood of them being, it's an interesting gamble. I don't hate it for either team because this one more so than the last one. Like, if Sam doesn't start at all this year, Seattle drafts another quarterback, you're already pretty much out on Sam. If Ford gets cut or he has a diminished role, that's a lot of lost value. And then you got a guy who already retired in college due to injuries, coming back off an Achilles. So,
All right. Well, then we have a fourth going with some contracts to dump for Chargers. The Dolphins frees up some cap in a couple of things, and the thought is, I wonder for what. Well, then the Saints turned some of this recently acquired capital from the Taylor and Kittle trade, as well as some of these dumped contracts for Josh Palmer and Robert Woods. So Colts breaks down Brian Thomas into a couple of receivers and immediately turns one into a future first. So, nice way to kind of spread out the value and hedge. I like that. We talked about the Purdy trade, and Tannehill has already moved off the Texans with a 5th for Jameis Winston. So, I mean, Texans, your Cleveland is showing, but of the two situations, would you rather have Tannehill, who's backing up Levis, or Winston, who's backing up Deshaun Watson? And for a fifth, it's probably worth it to have, Jameis.
Yep, I agree. I think that was a great price.
Man, it's almost. I said, we're not in draft season anymore. We can't go this long. We can't do things, topics to talk about. We're an hour and 40 minutes in. So, shockingly, these shoot this shit conversations work better when we have more people, on the pod and, some actually in the room the entire time. So, appreciate those who have watched live the entire time. And for those enjoying this later, hopefully longer form wasn't too upsetting for you. And now we get to the fun part of trying to make trades afterwards. And you know what? Maybe I might send an offer. My third one in the last week or so. So anything can happen.
Cool.